Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to this lecture on metacognition and reflection, thinking about the way we think, which sounds super cool, and it is. So we are going to talk about this in terms of our reflective letter assignment that's going to be wrapping up our quarter together. So some terms to help expand your schema, and at the very beginning of the quarter we talked about schema, which is an idea that Aristotle, remember the smart guy, we talked about, lived a long time ago, had a great beard, very dead now. He had this idea of schema that dealt with how we organize things and make sense of the world in our head, and how all of our past experiences help build this schema, help us understand what's going to happen next. And everyone's schema is going to be a little bit different because everyone's life experiences are different. So these are some terms that I've listed here for you that deal with schema and that we're going to talk about in terms of reflection. So the first of which is metacognition. You may have heard this before when people are like, oh, that's so meta. They're talking about metacognition, and it's an awareness and understanding of one's own thought process. So it's thinking about your thinking process, which sounds weird and like makes you go in a weird loop in your brain. You're like, I don't understand. But it really is just thinking about how you think and why you do the things you do. Self-analysis is pretty straightforward. Hi, Rosie. This is my daughter, Rosie. Can you wave? Hi, people.
Hi, people.
Okay, go play with Daddy. Mom's going to finish the lecture. Self-analysis is the analysis of oneself. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. In particular, one's motives and choices. Now, the Writing Program Administration, or what we're abbreviating as WPA outcomes, deal with students' college-level writing program knowledge. So it's things that you should learn in your first year's worth of college writing. So that would be English 101, English 102, and maybe English 235. So you're learning things like rhetorical knowledge, how do people make arguments, and how do they persuade others. We're looking at critical thinking processes. You had to do this in all of your projects. How do you wade through all of the data, all of the research, using your critical thinking and coming up with a conclusion? Reading and composing. You did lots of reading in this class, lots of articles. In fact, you read a whole novel. It was very exciting. And then knowledge of processes. That's like outlines and thesis statements. And knowledge of conventions. That's grammar. Where do we put a comma? Is this a complete sentence or a run-on? That kind of stuff. The habits of mind are more big picture kind of skills. So the Writing Program Administration skills are the skills. Is anyone else's house chaos right now? Because it's straight up chaos here. All right, habits of mind, big picture kind of things. The Writing Program Administration, the WPA outcomes, are more narrowly focused on writing. The habits of mind are things that will help you not only in this class, but hopefully in the rest of your academic career and elsewhere as well. So the habits of mind are ways that we look at learning. In this case, it's curiosity, openness, engagement, creativity, persistence, responsibility, flexibility, and metacognition. So curiosity, pretty self-explanatory. Were any of the essay topics things that you were interested in learning more about? Were you curious about trial by media and how it might affect people? Were you curious about whether someone had cultural bias that inspired them to do something horrific? Were you curious about Poirot and how that whole book was going to end? Openness is just a willingness to learn new things, to look at things from a different perspective, perhaps. As we looked at the bias testing we did at the beginning of Project 3, lots of you showed a great deal of openness when you're like, oh, I didn't understand that I maybe had some unconscious bias there. Awesome. That is great. That's something that's going to help you elsewhere as well. Engagement just means you're doing the work, you're thinking through the work, you're turning things in on time. Engagement is important. Creativity, everyone's got something cool and new to offer and bring to the table. And I love reading your essays because everyone's got such a cool perspective. So creativity is just showing who you are in your writing and your work. Persistence, not giving up, right? So this quarter has been tricky. COVID, craziness, on the political spectrum, on the cultural spectrum, on the economic spectrum, everything is just bonkersville, right? But you are persisting. You are keeping going. You are going to hit that finish line. So your persistence is just continuing to move forward despite challenges and difficulties. Responsibility, you're taking responsibility for your learning. You're doing these assignments. We're not in a physical classroom together, so I can't stand over your shoulder and be like, are you reading this? Are you highlighting this? What are you doing here? Right? I can't do that because I'm here in my office closet. So it's your responsibility to move your learning forward, and you're doing a fabulous job with that. Flexibility, you guys have demonstrated buttloads of flexibility because COVID and craziness and learning online is so hard. And you guys are being flexible, you're making your work schedules and your school schedules come together, you're taking care of families and doing all this, so flexibility is incredible. You guys are rock stars. And finally, metacognition, we talked about that's thinking about your own thinking. So we see metacognition in like the review process for our essays. Did you have to think about the choices you were making in the essay? Did you have to think about your thesis statement and kind of examine your arguments and whether they made sense to yourself and then to someone else? So metacognition, very useful there as well. So in your reflective writing, in your letter you're going to be writing this week, you're going to be addressing some of the WPA outcomes and some of the habits of mind. So you're going to tell me how you used at least one or two of the skills the WPA wants you to get out of this class. And then you're going to tell me how you used one or two of the skills that the habits of mind wanted you to get out of this class. So let's click on ahead. If you want to break these down into much more detail, I've got that for you here. Feel free to read it at your leisure. Learning about rhetorical concepts, that's just figuring out how people argue in their writing and how we can then argue. Again, reading and composing, you guys did that. You read books and articles, and then you composed essays. Develop facility in responding in a variety of situations. Yeah, you did that in essays, you did that in discussion boards, you did that in writing prompts and free writes, you did that in emails to me, all kinds of writing. Understand the use of a variety of technologies. You did research in multiple platforms, which is excellent. And then match the capabilities of different environments. Most of you had a print book, and almost all of us used electronic sources for our essays, projects 2 and 3. So lots of good stuff there. Critical reading, thinking, composing, just using our critical thinking skills. You can read through this at your leisure. I know nobody loves having PowerPoints read to them word for word. But you read a big range of stuff, from books to articles to websites. You had to locate credible sources from the library, and you use strategies like synthesis, highlighting and underlining and annotating to help you understand text more fully. You went through a writing process. You did multiple drafts, you did outlines and thesis statements, you did revision, you did discussion boards, you got feedback from me and from your peers, and then went through writing processes there. Lots of good stuff in your writing process that you've already tackled and performed to a high degree of quality. Knowledge of conventions. This is all about grammar. We had grammar supplements available for you in our modules, and you got grammar feedback from me in the essays. Where do commas go? How do we use semicolons with adverbial conjunctions? All kinds of fun stuff, apostrophes, you name it. We talked about it in our essays, and then support was available in Canvas as well. And then the habits of mind, we briefly talked about curiosity, openness, engagement, creativity, persistence, responsibility, flexibility, and metacognition. Here's the official definitions if you want them, but we went over how they practically work in this class in a previous slide. And that's it, guys. Woohoo! Metacognition and reflection. So if you go into the modules tab, which is always a fun thing to do, so why wouldn't we? And go to our reflective letter assignment, you'll see this PowerPoint available for you here. And then the reflective letter assignment itself available for you. This does not need to be a long document. I just want a little snapshot of what you've learned this quarter, what you've created, and what you're hoping to do next. So we are going to create this in a business letter format. Your name, your address, city, state. If you don't feel comfortable giving your address, just make one up. Be like 102 North Pole Drive, Santa City in Antarctica. I don't know. Whatever you want to do. If you don't want to put your real address, totally fine. We put the date, you address it to me, and then you start with a salutation. Dear Professor Wortley. That is actually the technical way to start a letter, whether I am dear to you or not. you still use the word dear. And then I want you to give a paragraph introducing your impressions of the quarter. Come up, if you can, with a metaphor or simile as your thesis statement. This could be like, English 101 was like a roller coaster ride. It had its ups and downs. And then you'll tell me about the ups and downs. So that's a simile, using the words like or as to compare two things. In a block letter style, all paragraphs are right aligned. I've got that here for you. The first line of the paragraph's not indented. Place your metaphor or simile at the end of this paragraph, just like you would a thesis statement. So our little metaphor and simile about roller coasters would go right here. In the next paragraph, you're going to talk about project 1, how it maybe was an up part of the roller coaster or a down part of the roller coaster. Make sure to mention WPA outcomes and habits of mind. So you could say project 1 was an up part of the roller coaster ride for me because I was able to showcase my rhetorical skills, making an argument that justice was the primary theme of the novel. Give at least one example of habit of mind. I could say I used curiosity as I read the book because I had no idea how it was going to end, and the ending caught me by surprise. There you go. Habit of mind, WPA outcome, connected to the metaphor. The second paragraph, you're going to talk about it in terms of project 2. If this project was harder, you could say this was a down point on the roller coaster for me. My WPA outcome was, now I need to remember what they are, huh, guys? Let's see. WPA outcome. I could say I used critical thinking, right? Critical thinking was my WPA outcome. I had to work really hard to read articles and come up with ideas about trial by media and whether it was a violation of the Sixth Amendment. That was really hard. So this was the down part of the roller coaster for me. Give an example of at least one habit of mind you used during the project. I used persistence because this was hard. I didn't want to do it, but ultimately I was able to get my drafts in. I revised it. I worked hard, and my persistence paid off, and I got it turned in. Does that make sense? And then in project 3, you could say this was an up part for me because it helped me look at the big picture of not only our community here at CBC, but the world in general and how cultures work together. So that was an up on the roller coaster. WP outcome I used was critical thinking, or, whatever one you want to pick from the list, reading and composing, because I had to read a whole bunch of articles and then compose an essay. So there's our WP outcome. Our habit of mind we were using, once again, we can look at our lovely thing. Habit of mind, I used openness for project 3 because it made me look at the world in a different way and examine how people interact. Make sense? Awesome. And then we'll discuss the idea of transfer. What kind of skills could you possibly take away from here and use elsewhere? Could it help you in English 102 or 235? Could it help you as you're writing cover letters for a job application? What real life scenarios do you think you might use some of these skills? And then close the letter with an overall impression of the class. I loved the class. It was awesome. The class was not my super favorite, and that's okay. Or I hated every minute of this class because it was really hard and I don't like writing. All of those are fine things to say. I'm just very interested in your overall impression. If you have any suggestions on how to improve the class, I'm also very, very open to those. So thank you guys for investing in this letter. You can just use a signature font. That's fine here.